Thank you very much indeed, Claire. And now on to Karl Coffey from On Post, which certainly is probably the oldest e-commerce company I've ever done business with. I've would think first interactions with you back in the early 90s. So looking forward to how you've walked the talk over the last many years.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I know that lunch is coming up, so I'll try not to dwell too long on themes that have been covered already in several presentations. It's reassuring to hear that people are saying the same things in different organisations about their experience of ISO 27001. I would have been surprised if that wasn't the case. And we didn't compare notes beforehand, so a lot of the stuff is similar. Just myself, I work for the IT division of On Post, which is known as Group Technology Solutions. I'm the Chief Enterprise Architect. One of my responsibilities is the Information Security Department, albeit that that's run day to day by a professional information security manager. I have been involved with the ISO standard, ISO 27001 and its predecessor standards, BS 7799 and ISO 17799 for 13 years now. Because in a previous company that I worked with, which was actually a subsidiary of On Post, we had a need, which I'll describe in a couple of slides' time, a need to implement that standard for a particular reason, hence my long experience with it. Really what I'm here about today is just to share some of the experiences that we've had over that time and some pointers for people that are preparing to embark on the journey. I think that really the big question that people need to ask themselves is, the very first question is, why would we do this? It is a very significant undertaking. It is not to be taken lightly. There's a lot involved in achieving ISO 27001, and really it depends on, I think, how mature your organisation is already in terms of its information security environment and posture. It can be very challenging. Just listen to the circulator presentation there with 12 staff. Take my hat off now for achieving that, because I would consider that to be very challenging. The company that subsidiary company I previously worked for, we had 100 staff. That was hard enough. On Post obviously is a much larger organisation, quite a complex organisation. So it is a significant undertaking, and there will be expenditure on, maybe quite a lot of expenditure, maybe not so much on staff, equipment and training. I think people who are embarking on this, you have the choice of compliance versus compliance against the standard versus actual external certification. I think you really need to go down the certification path to get the benefits and not just use it as a reference standard internally yourselves, because I think that would be easy to avoid implementing all of the good stuff. Sorry, I've gone too far. Yeah, so just on the context, give a bit of context on Post. A lot of people, when you ask people on the street what do you think of On Post, they think about letters and parcels. Actually, the company does a lot more than that. I thought I'd just talk a little bit about that for a couple of minutes to give you the context of why ISO 27001 is so important. Obviously, somebody mentioned earlier, I think it was John Ryan, Zippity, do you see mails anymore? Letters and parcels, actually you still do, quite a lot of them. Actually 2.8 million per day still in Ireland. It may not be there in the future, but today it's still a big business. But also, apart from the mail stuff, On Post has a very large post office network touching every part of the country. There is 1.7 million members of citizens of Ireland enter those post offices every week. It's the largest retail payments network in the country. There's a secondary network known as PostPoint. If any of you may not have heard of this, you've probably heard of Payzone. It's a very similar type business. It's at about 2,000 locations, so this would be shops, garages, etc., where mobile top-up and bill payment, those kind of services are offered through that. On Post also offers services through a lot of other channels, phone, web, mobile, expanding mobile, but there is quite a lot of web stuff there at the moment. In terms of banking and financial services business, this is a very large and important business from Post. It distributes 8.3 billion euros per annum through its post office network of social welfare benefits and cash. It also operates state savings on behalf of the National Treasury Management Agency, and currently holds almost 20 billion euros on that. That's a double-digit percentage share of the deposit market in Ireland. Post Office Savings Bank, which is a very old traditional bank, has 2 million accounts. You know, probably a lot of people in the room, children would have those. There is actually almost 3 billion euros on deposit in those at the moment. We also handle prize bonds sales, and we run the draw. So the prize bonds is a lottery type system. We run that draw. It's a weekly draw. There's a €1 million top prize every week, and there's a lot of smaller prizes. Every month, rather, there's a lot of smaller prizes. We also operate agency banking services on behalf of 3 banks, Ulster, Danske and Danske and AIB, which we've been doing for 13 years. And we're going to launch a payment account later in the year, issuing our own card. Western Union, PostFX. We do collect bill payments for 120 plus organisations. Also a lot of licence payments on behalf of the guards, the court service, TV licence, that's a large contract for RT, dog licences, firearms, bin charges, other retail solutions mentioned there. We also have a lot of subsidiary companies. That's just, this schematic just shows that, illustrates we have a big central hub, lots of different systems, channels feeding into those. It's really an intermediation business on behalf of all these different corporate customers. So who are the key stakeholders in Post? Obviously there's the general public and personal customers who come into post offices and who interact with the company on a day-to-day basis. Corporate customers, as I said, it's an intermediation business, so we have lots of private companies, government organisations, local authorities who are our big customers. Government have a particular interest in that the postal service as a utility operates commercially viably for the national interest. Employees, obviously, there's Post comes out every year as one of the top, within the top 5 trusted organisations in the country. That trust is, defended by employees, is very, very well regarded. So a lot of what we do seeks to sustain that going forward all the time. We're also regulated by Comreg and indeed in the central bank in terms of the financial services. Our Audit and Risk Committee from our board is a major stakeholder in this, and they want, one of the reasons that ISO 27001 is so important for us is that they want independent assurance that we are complying with best standards with regard to the protection of customers' data. Just a quick history of it. We started back with BS 7799 and ISO 1779, the predecessors. That was the reason we did that back so long ago is that we had another business which was digital signatures, qualified digital signatures, which is a different certification, which certification Europe did at the time, or still do it, and we needed to achieve that ISO standard as a prerequisite to getting that. We've exited that business since, so that's not really relevant anymore. There was a changeover in 2006 to the 27001-2005 standard, recertification against that. And then in 2011, PCI, Post Trust, PCI, which is a subsidiary company, was subsumed into this new organisation on Post GTS. And so that's when really I came into bringing this standard into An Post. There was already an existing information security department, a professional one, 7 people in it, which did a very good job of implementing all the technical controls. So really, but they didn't have an ISO 27001 program. So really, we kind of brought this in as part of that merger, if you like, to improve the overall management system that was in use for information security. And we extended the scope that at the time was web hosting, because we had a web hosting environment, and the Post Trust business, the e-signatures business. We extended that to bring in a number of An Post level 1. These are the most critical applications. An Post has about 140 business applications, major business applications, of which 40 have been classified as level 1. So initially there was only a small number of those were brought in. And then in 2015, we were certified against the 2013 version of the standard, and we extended our scope to include all of our level 1 applications, which is about 40 under the different headings of CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. This is just a quick schematic to show our information security organisation. The main purpose of this is to demonstrate that it isn't just about IT. There is a dedicated IT InfoSec team which reports to the CIO and to me, the enterprise architecture team. There's IT operations and support, but also an IP applications teams, but also there's the responsibility in the business units to provide their own input into the information security organisation, and that feeds up through line of business management into the board audit and risk committee, which is the main, sort of top level management group that we have to ultimately provide assurance to. The key benefits have kind of already been covered by many people. We have our existing corporate customers often require us to comply with their own set of standards, minimum information security standards for suppliers, and we are a major supplier of those. So often we get in, in the past we were getting in questionnaires from a lot of the large corporate customers, which are ISO 27001 type questionnaires. So it's a very repetitive process having to fill those in. So it's a big benefit to us to have this standard, because we just need to provide the certificate and maybe some additional information around their specific solutions. That's a big win in terms of reducing the admin. It's been mentioned already, commonly requested now, more so even these days in requests for proposals when we're bidding for business, to have this. For Unpost employees, it's a vehicle for developing a culture of participation, and that's important and has been mentioned as well. You have to try to move your organisation towards a culture of involvement in this stuff. I've mentioned the Board and Audit Risk Committee, provided that independent assurance for them, very important for them. And internal audit. Internal audit are very active in Unpost. They have dedicated IT security auditor, and this is viewed positively, albeit originally a little bit of scepticism for improvement. So just quickly moving on, in terms of the path to certification. So really, this is covering ground that a lot of people have covered already, particularly in the Vodafone, Air and Maxwell presentations. Really, you have to start with a baseline of, I think it would be very difficult for a large organisation unless they had an existing baseline of information security controls in place. We had a very mature set of controls and process and procedures really in the information security department, albeit that there wasn't a formal management system. One of the areas that we did focus on initially was application security. So there was more certainty around the infrastructure in the organisation. That was very good security controls. There had been a lot of investment in things like SIEM, antivirus, anti-malware, the usual stuff, network security firewalls. But in relation to the management system, there was less on audit and compliance, and also, on application security. There was less confidence, if you like, that application security was being covered as well. So we undertook a gap analysis, and how we went about that was we actually produced an internal standard called the Information Security Baseline Standard, or ISBS for short, which was based on ISO, albeit a slimmed down version. And we basically got all of the application owners to self-assess themselves and their teams against that, collated all that information back, improved the accuracy of it, and used that as effectively the gap analysis. That very quickly gave us a compliance level for all of those applications. And initially, because of the information, we had to go back over a second time to improve the accuracy. It ranged from like 50 to 70, climbed up to about maybe between 60 and 85% across those applications. So a pretty good space, but still quite a number of things to do. So that was a great starting point for that. And I recommend that everybody would do that to start with. It's been mentioned already, you're dead in the water unless you have strong management support. there's a lot involved in doing this, and you really absolutely have to have top management support. In our case, the CIO, who is the senior IT person in the organisation, with the backing of the CEO of Unpost and the CFO, we're really behind this, and that's very important. Another point is, this has come up over the years. I've noticed people have mentioned this. You need to aim. There's no point in doing this just to tick boxes, right? So that you can say, well, I have ISO, and you've ticked those a few boxes to lead to that, and it'll be very difficult to achieve the certification by ticking boxes, I might add. But you really, there is quite a bit of overhead in it initially, at least. You need to build it into business as usual, as has been mentioned. So you should aim for genuine reform where you need to do that, and encourage buy-in amongst staff by selling value add. Again, I would say that people more recent years who work in the IT departments in particular are more bought into the idea that they need to actively participate in information security themselves. Everybody does, as a process and a system, and they can't avoid it. It might bring a little bit initially extra overhead to their day-to-day job, but eventually they have to actually participate. So I think people see that now, so it's kind of easier to sell this. Risk management, it has been mentioned, but you absolutely have to have a good risk management system. I call it IT risk management here as part of the overall enterprise risk management system. It doesn't have to be very complicated. People have mentioned SharePoint. We use a SharePoint as well for documentation, document management, and indeed for logging risks. So we just use simple SharePoint lists where we log risks, we score them on impact and probability basis, and then we review those every month or so at our senior management meetings. We have an extract of those which are marked as enterprise risks, the ones that really affect the business, not the low-level technical ones, but the big high-level ones. Luckily, there isn't a huge number of those. Those are reported up to our board 3 or 4 times a year. So I think you absolutely have to have risk management. Really is the key to an information security management system to be effective. Also, it helps to address risks in a methodical manner, and that drives out continuous improvement. The scope. It was mentioned a couple of times, I think, in the Maxwell presentation. The way I think we succeeded in this originally when we were a smaller organisation was by limiting the scope. So we started off with web hosting. As I said, we had a web hosting environment and the business of e-signatures. So around those systems. And we were very unsure when we first did this what was really involved with it. It was really a jump into the unknown back in 2003 when we did this first under BS 7799. Over the years, we've become much more familiar with it, and it's become easier. But if you're starting at first, it can be daunting. So I think a good way of doing this is, if you can, start with a more limited scope. Now, the scope has to be meaningful. I mean, it can't just be, and basically, the door over there, with the physical access controls is my scope, but at the same time, it needs to be achievable. Don't set the task too large. And then the great thing about it is, once you have achieved your first audit, you can then extend the scope over time to subsequent audits. You can change your statement of scope, and that's what we've done. I think that's a very useful way of approaching it. I've mentioned building buy-in across the organisation. I have to admit, I encountered a bit of scepticism amongst in my own organisation in terms of internal audit, but I think they're really bought into it now. Internal audit are very involved in technical, low-level sort of investigation to make sure that you're compliant with a lot of technical controls. So they see this as a higher-level management standard, but it's very complementary to the implementation of technical controls, and it brings discipline to the whole continuous improvement process. So I think they're very now 2 or 3 years later after we've done this, they're very, very bought into it, and everybody's on board. I think also it's important to state that IT managers will view this initially, if you're not already doing it, as a potential extra work and an overhead for them in their day-to-day, and they might be resistant of it initially. And I think that over time they'll see, as it's built into business as usual, they will see the benefits and they won't have that view, but initially you might get that little bit of pushback. And I think that really, to get that management support, you have to deliver a message that it isn't optional. This is part of the company program, you have to get involved. I think you should make that statement. People will need help from professional information security personnel. As I said, we have a dedicated information team, but it's small. There's only there's less than 10 people in that team, about 7 or 8 people. But you do need help to interpret the standard. When you're reading it first yourself, you might not understand what the different clauses mean. In terms of the Annex A and IS 27002 guidance in particular, there's a lot of controls in there, a lot of sections, a lot of control objectives. Understanding the spread of responsibility. What I mean by that is that, again, what we've experienced, and sometimes the wider information security, the wider IT organisation will see this as an information security department issue, and they'll say, "Oh, they'll sort that out. We don't have to worry about it too much." And it's very important to get to kill that idea straight away on the head. I mean, obviously, all the application owners are responsible for managing their own applications. Business owners have to sign off business risks and are responsible for example, user access management business systems. So it's not just the IT security department that's going to sort this for you. Everybody has to get involved and do their bit. Again, it's not just about the Annex A and the 27002 guidance. You do need to understand what's in the ISO 27001 in terms of risk management. You have to have comprehensive policies in place. Starting point, it's been mentioned already. Luckily, on PUS, being a large organisation, had a lot of information security policies in place. Albeit now that a lot of them needed to be updated, improved, consolidated. There was a good bit of work done on that and stored in SharePoint, and they're reviewed now annually. Proactive leadership management, there has to be, the IT management in particular, I think, or the service management personnel involved really have to be brought in and lead this in a proactive manner. I think you do need to have properly qualified information security personnel, particularly in the, if you're in a larger, more complex organisation that can deal with the technical stuff. Engender a risk management culture, key to success. In my job, I'm responsible for kind of overall solution architecture and solution design. We've always tried to build in, do threat analysis when we're designing systems, and build in risk from, address risks from the start throughout a project life cycle. That's a culture that builds up over time as more people get involved. I think that's a really good thing to try to achieve. You do need formal documentation. Like, there are things like you have to have a written statement of scope, you have to have a statement of applicability, probably one of the most important documents, and there are other things, but you don't have to, you obviously have day-to-day operational material guides and stuff like that, but it doesn't have to be a massive library. So for people setting out, I wouldn't be overly put off by the fact that you have to create masses of documentation. In the 2013 version of standard, you are required to measure. This is something new, which we are doing that ourselves, but we're getting better at it. I'll try to speed along now because I know I'm running out of time. Management review of ISMS is needed. You need to demonstrate continuous improvement to the auditors. Preparing for the certification audit, deal closely with auditors, be upfront. Don't be afraid to identify gaps, don't try to hide anything, there's no need to do that. Ensure that there's adequate in-house awareness and briefing up front, so brief people that are going to participate in an audit before they arrive. Don't have people being caught cold, like rabbits in the headlights scenario. Don't, get them plenty brief. And as somebody said already in the Maxwell presentation, make sure you're well prepped, like have your documentation ready, have your people set up, because it'll make things a lot easier on the day. End result, you get your certification. Thank you very much.